If done well, the early death of a major star can be a movie's defining iconic twist. Done badly though, it just seems like a bit of a waste of talent, and leaves the audience feeling a bit cheated. It's a risky game to play, that is for sure. But I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 movies that cast major actors just today. Number 10, Ben Affleck's Smokin' Aces. This knockabout hitman actioner was always marketed as an ensemble piece about the array of colourful characters out to kill, catch, or protect the titular Vegas magician/gangster. Nevertheless, Ben Affleck, then on the verge of a career renaissance that would lead to a Best Picture Oscar, was the big name amongst an impressive list of up-and-comers. In a cast involving torture lovers who have chewed off their own fingertips and latex mask-wearing masters of disguise, Affleck's world-weary bail bondsman felt like the more grounded character we were supposed to root for. Sure enough, the early scenes presented Affleck as a sort of viewpoint character to establish the setup. But then he was summarily bumped off by Nazi skinhead Chris Pine and his equally psychotic brothers, before the main body of the movie's action really got going. Instead, the movie ultimately fixes on Ryan Reynolds' FBI agent as the de facto hero. Now, these days, Reynolds heading up such an ensemble would not be out of the ordinary, would it? But back in 2006, he hadn't yet even played the bad version of Deadpool. His signature role was still frat boy Van Wilder at this point. He's come a long way. Still though, getting rid of the movie's biggest name in the first act certainly helped establish Smokin' Aces' chaotic energy. Number 9, Jennifer Lopez, Jersey Girl. We've had one half of super couple Bennifer, now here's the other. While the rest of the films on this list come under the action, thriller, and horror genres, movies in which a character death is at least an expected part of the standard narrative, Jersey Girl is a dramedy. Specifically, it was Kevin Smith's failed attempt to leave behind the sophomoric humor of his View Askew-universe for more mature fare. Smith's trump card came from tying the film to the hottest celeb couple of the day. Once his buddy Ben Affleck brought along his latest paramour, Jennifer Lopez, the shocking twist was then to be that audiences had come expecting to see a J-Lo vehicle, only to see her die in childbirth right at the start. Right then, the film was really about Affleck's character and their daughter. You see, the daughter is actually the eponymous Jersey Girl, not Jenny from the block. Unfortunately, the Bennifer marketing strategy backfired spectacularly. Through a combination of the disastrous reception to their previous on-screen team-up, Jiggly, and their subsequent real-life breakup. It all worked out in the end though, right? Sort of. Number 8, Ewan McGregor, Stormbreaker. There was a time that Ewan McGregor was hotly rumoured to be the next James Bond. Instead though, he had to just make do with nodding towards those rumours by playing a British super spy in the movie of the Bond for Kids Alex Rider books. The biggest name in the cast, McGregor was given top billing and featured prominently in much of the movie's marketing. Of course, audiences knew that Alex Pettifer as Alex Rider was going to be Stormbreaker's lead, but anyone unfamiliar with the story must have assumed that McGregor as his uncle Ian Rider would still have some sort of significant mentor role. But after a quick motorbike car helicopter chase and all of a couple of minutes of screen time in the movie's prologue, McGregor gets shot in the face. So much for that then. It turns out that all the training he needed to do to make Alex into an action spy had been handily squeezed into adventure holidays before the movie even began. Convenient that. Number 7, Guy Pearce, The Hurt Locker. Before being cast in Oscar darling The Hurt Locker, future Hawkeye himself, Jeremy Renner, was probably best known for playing serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer in a low-budget true crime horror, and for his supporting role as a zombie-killing soldier in 28 Weeks Later. Director Catherine Bigelow made sure then to surround her lead with some better-known stars. Rather than Renner, the movie opens on the far more familiar face of Guy Pearce as a bomb disposal expert, and our way into the film's world of improvised Iraqi explosive devices. Just when we've got comfortable with the idea that the tense opening scene is designed to show the process of dealing with such devices, the cast's biggest name explodes. It's a shocking moment that tells the audience quite how hazardous the job of bomb disposal really is, and asks questions of what kind of person puts themselves in a place where even an expert can get blown up in the blink of an eye. And this wasn't the last time that the Memento and LA Confidential star would show up in an incidental role just to die. The ending to Prometheus had him emerge in old age makeup and prosthetics, only to be almost immediately dispatched by the engineer. And speaking of that franchise, number 6, James Franco, Alien Covenant. Casting a star name just for them to die is something of a tradition for the Alien franchise. You could even say that this is true of the original in a way, in which Sigourney Weaver was far from the most familiar name at the time, and the movie seemed initially to frame Tom Skerritt's captain as the hero. The Nostromo's captain gets an abundance of attention though compared to the captain of the Covenant. James Franco has always been an actor who makes some esoteric choices of material. Even so, taking a role as the ship's captain in a big sci-fi blockbuster like Alien Covenant, only to then go up in flames without waking from cryo sleep in literally the first scene on the ship, is one of his stranger moves. In fact, after much of his already brief role was left on the cutting room floor, Franco had the unusual distinction of being a major star who had more screen time in the promotional material than in the entire finished movie. Very weird. Promotional short The Last Supper, showing the Covenant's crew just before entering cryo sleep, and actually giving us a sense of Franco's captain as a person and his relationship with the crew, and his wife, the movie's protagonist, would have made a far better opening scene to the actual movie. That way, viewers might have actually cared about Jacob Branton's death and its effects. Number 5, George Clooney, Gravity. The Ocean siblings may never have got to share the screen in the numerically inclined heist franchise, but George Clooney and Sandra Bullock did team up as the only actors in the vast nothingness of outer space in Gravity. Still, the film is a solo survivalist story, which means that there's no room for it to be a two-hander for too long. Clooney's role as the experienced astronaut is to be the safe pair of hands to Bullock's callow rookie. His reassuring, laid-back tones are there to hold her and the audience's hand through the movie's setup. He is her literal tether, and when the movie no longer needs him to establish the stakes, that line is cut and he just drifts away. See you later, Clooney. It's a moment that helps drive home how completely alone and helpless Bullock really is here. The movie's biggest star is gone. Despite being, dead, he crops up again in the movie's final act as an inspirational hallucination to spur Bullock on to one last act of heroic survival. Number 4, Gwyneth Paltrow, Contagion. Steven Soderbergh's 2011 viral outbreak thriller had been largely forgotten until COVID suddenly had people declaring it the most prescient movie of our time. On its release, however, Contagion drew more interest for its impressively starry ensemble than its ability to predict a realistic global pandemic. In a cast that included Kate Winslet, Matt Damon, Marion Cotillard, and Jude Law, it was Gwyneth Paltrow as an ordinary suburbanite who was our introductory character. It was through her eyes that we saw the origins of the outbreak and its arrival in America. The Oscar-winning Iron Man star seemed positioned as the ordinary everywoman audience surrogate in Contagion's world of doctors, scientists, and conspiracy theorists. But once she had introduced the virus, Paltrow's role in Contagion was complete. All she had to do is die to prove how deadly the virus was, and then the movie could begin in earnest. Put simply, her whole part was really just a prologue. And it turns out that Damon, as her husband, was the real ordinary everyman character of the ensemble. Like others on this list, Paltrow's shocking death scene isn't her final moment of the movie though. There's time for a flashback. In fact, although she has no part to play in the main body of the film, Paltrow does actually get to bookend it. She returns for Contagion's final scene, which shows how an infected bat led to Patient Zero, and to her being the first infected American. Number 3, Bryan Cranston, Godzilla. Fans of one of the most acclaimed TV shows of all time were excited to see star Bryan Cranston's first post-Breaking Bad role was a part in the new Godzilla movie. The movie's marketing made sure to cash in on Cranston's TV fame, with trailers that emphasized the plotline in which his nuclear engineer tried to discover the cause of his power plant's destruction years earlier. In the actual film though, the erstwhile Walter White didn't even last long enough for the movie's other headline star to show up. You know, the gargantuan atomic lizard. Instead, he was bumped off by a lesser nuclear monster at the end of the first act, in order to give his son some angst as the movie's real protagonist. Boo. Audiences were generally more irritated at focusing on a wooden Aaron Taylor Johnson ahead of Cranston's more interesting character than they were shocked at the early death of a big-name star. Even Cranston himself would go on to call his character's early death a narrative mistake, and that it was. Number 2, Janet Leigh, Psycho. The classic example of this trope is also arguably one where it worked a bit too well. Janet Leigh, the movie's headline star, getting stabbed to death in the shower only about 20 minutes into Psycho, is the most iconic scene in one of the most famous movies of all time. I mean, mean, seriously, it's as hard to watch today and not know what's coming as it is to read Jekyll and Hyde as a mystery about what connects the title characters. Maybe they're just mates. Nevertheless, for its original audience, Psycho appeared almost entirely focused on its star actress as Marion Crane, a woman who steals $40,000 and goes on the run. That was until the sharp twist at the end of the first act dispatched Marion with shocking brutality. The plotline of the stolen money was completely forgotten as the movie shifted gears into its real story, that of murderous mummy's boy Norman Bates. It's to Psycho's credit that the movie is enough of a masterpiece of suspense to survive as a horror classic, despite everyone knowing now that its supposed star is a decoy lead just there to die. And number 1, Samuel L. Jackson, Deep Blue Sea. When cast in Deep Blue Sea, Samuel L. Jackson had already failed to escape his fight with giant beasts in an earlier monster hit. In Jurassic Park though, Jackson was not yet a big enough star even to merit actually being mauled by velociraptors on screen. His severed arm was all that was left to show that he had ever been there. By the time that this extremely silly super shark adventure rolled around 6 years later, however, Jackson was the cast's big draw. Yeah, baby. Indeed, he was a starry enough name that it is no surprise that his big shot corporate executive gets to deliver the grandstanding inspirational speech in the movie's most memorable scene. It was perhaps more of a shock though when Jackson was mid-monologue and the gigantic Mako shark shot up from the water to chomp him in two. While fun, Deep Blue Sea doesn't often stray from the standard beats of a cheesy monster B-movie, but that just makes it all the more memorable in the one moment where it completely subverts the formula.